I know that my Redeemer lives. Song number 479 out of the Hymns for Worship. Sing the first, second, and last verse of this song. I know.
Good evening. It's good to be with you and see everybody tonight. Bruce came through on his promise to get books for everybody. If you don't have a book, raise your hand. We have people back there. Jody's going to be. Todd, you can go help out too.
No, there's two.
Okay, two. Okay. I wanted you to have the opportunity. We are studying still sins of the tongue. We are going to be on lesson 2, which is titled Lying, Bearing False Witness, and False Swearing. Give them a little more time to get it to you. We talked last week that sins of the tongue are really sins of the heart that come out through the mouth. That we speak, the tongue does what we tell it to, or what we try to tell it to. The tongue, as well as the body parts that we use, move and do what we want it to do. If I want my tongue to say something, normally I can get it to say what I want. Sometimes it doesn't work out quite that way. Just like our brain tells our body what to do. As we want it done, that happens. And so the sins that the tongue comes up with or sins that originate in our heart. Jesus said in Luke 6, verse 45, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good. An evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. The sins that we commit, and as I was going through this and preparing the information, it dawned on me that, you know what, there are sins, the sin of lying, you don't have to speak it. I would imagine that, I don't know sign language, but Karen Binko does. And I would imagine that people can say, no, I didn't do that. And we can shake our heads, and we can write. But if we give false information, either through our tongue, through the nodding or shaking of our heads, or whatever it is, it's still a lie. Now, we're going to take these in order that the book has them: lying first, bearing false witness, and then false swearing. We've all been caught up there one time or another, either as a kid or as an adult, and maybe more times than that. You know, it's interesting whenever you have children, and there are things out there, usually in the kitchen, I think about. And a child gets up while mom's gone, and he pulls out things, and he or she starts trying to do something in baking, and mom comes around the corner, and what does she see? A mess. And then there's a child that's looking at you like, okay, did you do that? Nope. Brenda, you've had that happen? Is the child lying? Yeah. You know, and why? He doesn't want to be punished for what happened. We use our tongues in that way. Child may say, you know, and some of them may say, yeah, I did it. Not knowing what's going to happen next. But no matter how we give a dishonest answer to a question, it's still a lie. What is a lie? Merriam-Webster defines it as this: to make an untrue statement with the intent to deceive, or to create a false or misleading impression. So the question I have for you: are all false statements or all incorrect statements that we make, are they lies? Not necessarily. It depends. If a person woke up like my father-in-law, when we were back down there last month, it's evening, it's dark, he's ready for lunch. It's time for lunch. No, Pops, not time for lunch. And we could not convince him that it was, even though he could look outside, it was dark. It was daytime. It was morning. He's at that stage where he's going to do that more and more. But he wasn't lying. That's what his perception of what he saw was, or whatever was going on in his mind at that time. Why do people lie? I've got a list of them. Give me some. Avoid consequences, like that child we just talked about. He doesn't want to get a spanking for what he did, so he may shake his head and say, no, I didn't, and he may even say that his brother did it, or sister. So what's another one? To deceive. Why would people want to do that, though? You're right. There are, I guess, what's that, pathological liars? I don't know what, is that the right word? That lie, that's their nature. Other reasons, I've got about 6 or 7 here. Shame for what they did, yeah, definitely. Hide it. Hide what I did, or hide that I didn't or do that. That sounds like a dictionary definition. Where's your dictionary? To gain an unethical advantage. And that's really a lot of what goes on too. Sometimes maybe it's to manipulate others to do things for us. We need something done, so we tell them things. Ben. Yeah, I think it is. And I think we touched on that last week just briefly. That flattery, I mean, you can tell somebody that they look nice. In fact, it's good for a husband to tell his wife that she looks good. And hope you're telling the truth, really. But not to tell people that just to gain something. May do it to spare somebody's feelings like that. You know, if your husband or wife says, you know, does this look good on me? You may have your hands full or your mouth full there at that point. But we all run across these things, and it's how we handle the situation. We may have a secret that we want to keep, that somebody does something, and we may profess that we don't know. We want to be liked by people, possibly. But why? As I was going through and preparing things, I didn't so much go by the book. I just took his guidelines and went with them. But why is lying a sin? Have you thought about that? Okay, so what? Why is that a sin? Exactly. That's exactly what I had. If you go back and you look at who God is, what does he stand for? Lying violates several principles about God. Peter in 1 Peter 1:16 says, because it is written, be ye holy, for I am holy. That was taken from Leviticus 20, verse 7. I'm going to read that to you. It's a little bit different. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be ye holy, for I am the Lord your God. God says, you be holy, because I'm holy. The word holy there. As I looked it up, trying to get a good definition, a deep one to some extent, found it says, it speaks of God with a measure of awe. It can be used almost as a synonym of deity. Holy, according to, this is the theological word book of Old Testament. His holy, the phrase, his holy name is the name of God. The inner room of God's dwelling in the Holy of Holies is what? Well, in the temple it was the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. He continued on in his writing, the biblical viewpoint would refer not only to the mystery of his power, but also to his character as totally good and entirely without evil. So since God is holy, he is totally pure, he's totally holy, anything that violates that comes into direct opposition to him. Can God lie? The Bible says in Hebrews 6:18, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. That's an amazing statement. It is to me. That God cannot lie even if he wants, which he doesn't want to. But it is impossible for God to lie. And what lies behind that is his attributes, that he's all-knowing, he's all-seeing. There's nothing that gets past him. There is no reason for him, and there's nobody greater than him. Well, is God above sin? James 1st chapter, verse 13, as we talked about in Bruce's class last quarter. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt any man. Now, we've not all known that God tries. He tries us, he tests us, he, quote, tempts us. That's what a temptation is a trial. But is God, when he gives, let's say Abraham, when Abraham was told to go take your son Isaac, your only son, and take him to the mountain that I will show you and offer him as a sacrifice to me, was he telling Abraham to sin? No. And if God had not interfered, what would have happened to Isaac? He would have died. Because what did Abraham believe would happen? That even if he took his life, that God would raise him back from the dead. But God wasn't trying to seek death there. He wasn't trying to get Abraham to violate any of his rules. It was a trial, a test of his faith. And before it got to the point when he drew that knife and he raised it to slay it, the angel said, stop. Then what did he say? Now I know. I now know. God knew it alone, but who had to be convinced of it? Abraham. Abraham proved it. Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19. There are 6 things that the Lord strongly dislikes, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. 7 things that the Lord dislikes. Not just a little bit, but strongly dislikes them. And 2 of them are part of the lesson that we have tonight: a lying tongue and a false witness. And we're going to talk about those. In the 10 Commandments, there is one law in there that covers one of these things tonight. What is that? Bearing false witness, number 9. And we'll get it to it a little bit later, but when we look at the nature of God, just the fact of who he is, what he is, his power, his authority, his holiness, his purity, and Jesus, of course, being divine the same way in the Spirit is too. A lie violates that. It severs my relationship with God. Because if I'm the liar, that's what I have done. What does the Bible say about lying and liars? Jesus said in John 8:44, "For you are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it." Wow. That's a pretty scathing description of Satan. Yeah. Now that's the consequence of it. All liars will have their part in a lake that burns with fire and brimstone. But look what he says. He said he was a murderer from the beginning. He is a liar and the father of it. Let's go back to Genesis. There in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, we won't spend a lot of time. Or was it 3? Well, but the thing that they were told. Back in chapter 2, verse 17. But of the tree of knowledge, God told them they could eat of all the trees in the garden. He said, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest of it, thou shalt surely die." Okay, we know that was spiritual death, not physical death. Although physical death began. The body began decaying because of that. But in the next chapter, Satan approaches Eve. And it says there in verse 1, he said, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." Eve changed things a little bit, of course. But what does Satan say? The Satan in verse 4 said unto the woman, "You shall not surely die." I mean, a bald-faced lie, just flat out, you will not die. But then he also told a truth there. "For God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Part of that was true. They didn't become as gods in another respect, but they became to the point that they now understood that there was good and evil. And who was the father of that lie? The serpent, who was represented by Satan. Yes, Stephen. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, according to the scriptures, everything Satan does, everything Satan says, everything he backs, there is nothing good about it. He's always got a plan. He's always got a hook that he's trying to get into. You know, when you go fishing, and I'm not a very good fisherman, but when you got that worm on the bait and you throw it out there, what are you trying to do? You want that fish to see something he likes, but it's deadly. Satan's worse than that. Proverbs 14:5, a trustworthy witness will not lie, but a false witness, and we're going to get to false witnesses a little bit later, utters lies. Satan was a false witness. He knew what was in God's plan. He knew what was going on. But he wanted to have his way. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is bearing false witness. And like Todd said, this is covered partially by the 9th commandment. Turn to Exodus 20. As I was going through these things, I remembered that 4 or 5 years ago, Alan taught from the 10 Commandments, didn't you? Started with the top part of them. I don't remember what we talked about bearing false witness, but it did come back to me. And the 10 Commandments that God gave deal with different things. The first ones deal with man and God. And the last few about man's relationship to man. Well, we'll just go through all of them. There, we'll start at the beginning. We've got a little bit of time. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I am the Lord, back in verse 2 of chapter 20. I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself down to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt work and do all of thy labor. 6 days thou shalt labor and do all of thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day of the Lord. In it thou shalt do no work, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy border. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Now that's the first one that pertains not to between God and man, although sinning of it, not doing it, would break it. But this is one for man. Man needed to take a break and have rest. But then he continues on relationships from that point on between man and man. Verse 12, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the earth, which the Lord hath given thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservants, or his maidservants, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is the neighbor's. So he's given some laws here about how we deal with our neighbors. And of course, who is our neighbor? One of them asked Jesus that, who's my neighbor? And what was the answer? What'd you say? The Good Samaritan. What'd somebody else say? Which ends up being what? Everybody. So this commandment, is given to everybody. And even though we're not under the 10 Commandments, these are still principles that God's people should live by. Here's some things that were said. And one little note I wrote about that 9th commandment. It means to heed, pay attention, or respond to lying, or untruthful witnesses or testimony. We have got this word right, this commandment deals with witnesses and how we deal with our neighbors. Proverbs 14:5, a faithful witness does not lie, but a false witness shall utter lies. 14:25, a true witness delivers souls, but a deceitful witness speaks lies. Proverbs 6, verse 19, a false witness utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. And then a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will perish. So God takes lying seriously, but he also takes our interaction with our brotherhood very seriously. When we bear false witness, what does that mean? I tried to look up these words as they meant in the Hebrew. To bear means to put up with. We are not to put up with a false witness. The law of Moses didn't either. In Deuteronomy 19, verses 16 through 21, it said, if a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, here's how God dealt with it. Deuteronomy 19, 16 through 21. If a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, then both the men who have the dispute shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who will be in office in those days. The judges shall investigate thoroughly, and if the witness is a false witness and has falsely accused his brother, then you shall do to him as he had intended to do to his brother. Thus you shall purge evil from among you. By stating something falsely against your neighbor, or even allowing somebody else to do it, it was not to be done. Can you imagine something that maybe even wouldn't have been thought of in our time to be, this happens all the time around this country. But this went before a priest or a judge of Israel. And it was a serious matter. To the point that if he was lying, whatever he had intended, the first guy had intended, that's what will happen to him. Proverbs 19:9, a false witness will not go unpunished, but he who tells lies will perish. Proverbs 25:18, a man that bears false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. Can you imagine taking a big hammer to a person? And this is what the Bible says. A man that bears false witness against his neighbor is a hammer and a sword and a sharp arrow. What kind of damage does that do to a body? Maybe kill, yeah. And where did it come from? The mouth. The mouth. It's interesting that in the law of the Hebrews, that in Deuteronomy 17 and 6, it says, on the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, the condemned shall be put to death. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. So if you were accused of something, there had to be somebody else to back it up. One person couldn't do it. But if it was just one Todd and I get into a thing, we have to go before the judge. In this case, in our case here, if it was something that was not, that would violate the laws out here, would be something I'm sure that we'd take to the elders. Because it's sowing discord. False swearing. And I'm going to take it a little bit probably out of context. We haven't got long in it, but here. What is swearing in the context of here? Taking an oath. Doesn't the Bible say don't swear? In context, it does, in one context. And as I was going through this, whenever a couple gets married, and I was thinking about Rebecca and Jeremy, listening to what, as Alan quoted their vows, how did you say it? And just generally, I don't mean exactly verbatim. Do you solemnly swear or do you vow? I so-and-so take you so-and-so. What's the wording? Do y'all remember? Rebecca, what did you say? She said, yeah, she remembers. No, what I was looking for, I understand. I put you on the spot. Was the word swear used is what I was wondering. And there's nothing wrong with the word swear if it's used right. Because whenever you go to court, if you've ever been on a jury duty, if you've ever done anything, what do you have to do? If you get impaneled for a jury, and I've done that before, what do you have to say that you will do? Or swear. Now, they have changed that because there's a lot of people who say, okay, I won't swear, but I will solemnly affirm. Well, they mean the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you sign your tax return. That's coming up, isn't it? So what I'm saying, we get into that. We do swear. But to have somebody to swear falsely, swear means to make a solemn statement or a promise undertaking to do something or affirming that something is the case. Number 2, to take an oath. Number 3, take a solemn oath as of the truth of a statement. To false swear is the intentional act of swearing a false oath or falsifying an affirmation to tell the truth, whether spoken or in writing, concerning matters material to an official proceeding. What's our word for that nowadays? Perjury. Perjury. That's what this last part of this lesson is about. Civilizations have taken a dim view of perjury. And I'm just going to use that word instead of trying to say 2 of them, false swearing. In Egypt, the penalty for lying was amputation of the nose and ears. Why the nose, I don't know. In Athens, a false witness was seriously fined. If convicted 3 times of the same wrongdoing, they lost their civil rights. Now this one's interesting here. This was in a commentary. In Rome, a law of the 12 tablets judged the wrongdoer to be thrown headlong from the Tarpeian Rock, which is a steep cliff used during Roman Republic as a site of execution. Murderers, traitors, perjurers, and licentious slaves, if convicted by the public officials, were flung off of the cliff to their deaths, about 80 feet. Perjury. What does the Bible say about swearing? Genesis 24, 2 through 4. This is about Abraham. Abraham is about, he's realized the time has come and he needs to get a wife for Isaac. He calls his servant in, and he said, Abraham said to his oldest servant that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but thou shalt go into my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. You will swear to me that you will do this. What's Hebrews 6:13 say about swearing? For when God made a promise to Abraham, he could swear by no one greater. He swore by himself. Now, we can't use, now the scriptures do say that we are not to swear. And when you go back and look at that, they're talking about the fact that men were swearing by the gold in the temple or the temple itself, and figuring that if I swear and use God's name in it or somebody else, that makes it either right or wrong. It's a good swear or a bad swear. And when Jesus says, here in Matthew 5:33, ye have heard that it has been said by of old times, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say to you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, neither by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shall you swear by your head, because you can't make one hair black or white, or keep them on there, as my case is. But let your communication be heard, because be yea, yea, or nay, nay, for so whatsoever is more than these is evil. If you're trying to make an impression or make something say, I swear by this, as a more secure swear, that's wrong. When we tell somebody we will do something, what should we do? Do it. When it used to be said, what, a man's word was his what? His bond. If a man said, I'm going to do this, he did it. That's what we should be doing. In James 5:12, the last verse, but above all things, my brethren, swear not neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, your nay be nay, lest you fall into condemnation. Speak what you have to say. Say it. And then say, I will, whatever it is, I will do it or I won't do it. And then follow through. Any comments or questions? Yes, Don. Did you raise your hand? Okay. We are dismissed.
If you'd like to mark in your songbooks, the invitation song will be There Is a Habitation, song number 227, There Is a Habitation. Before the invitation, we'll sing We Will Glorify the King of Kings. It will only be on the PowerPoint above. We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. We will bow before his throne. We will worship him. Worship him alone. He is Lord of heaven, Lord of earth. He is Lord of all who live. He is Lord above the universe. All praise to him we give. Hallelujah to Hallelujah to the Lamb. Hallelujah to the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am.
We've recently begun a new year, and it's always somewhat of an exciting time as we start the new year. We look forward to it with anticipation. You have to get used to writing a new date, and also we think about historically what has occurred in the past year. I enjoy history. I like seeing maybe on TV or YouTube video or on internet sort of a summary of different events, major events that occurred in the past year. And there's one publication that happens every year, and that's the people we lost. And usually these are people that are famous for, they may be famous athletes, famous actors, actresses, politicians. They may be even notable criminals. They may be people who have done spectacular things. But typically, if they're on that list, they're notable. And there's something morbidly fascinating about that to me. I find it interesting. And apparently, I'm not the only person because they keep putting these lists out every year. And apparently, quite a few people look at those. But I ask myself, why is that interesting to me to see a list of people who have lived but now are dead? And the list of people may be people who are 99 years old or 19 years old. But what is it about that that's of interest to me? I think one of the things that's interesting is that death is a great equalizer. Whether a person was immensely famous, wealthy, powerful, on that list, or a person that hardly anyone knew, when they die, there's really no difference between them from a physical standpoint. Their life is ended. Their time on this earth is gone. And now there is only eternity ahead of them. And whether they're extremely wealthy or powerful, we can go to their grave and we can see their grave, and their body is decaying just like the poor person or the rich person. And so death is the great equalizer, regardless of what's been accomplished in this life. But death also is an appointment that we all have. In James, the 4th chapter, verse 13, James 4, verse 13, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we shall go to such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So, death is the appointment that we all have. And we make plans, and rightfully so, we plan. We plan for tomorrow. We plan for next year. We may plan for years ahead to the future. But we don't know what tomorrow holds. And we say this often. We have no promise of tomorrow. All we have is right now. And so we must evaluate where we are with God, because we all have that appointment with death, and we will stand before God in eternity. So the question is tonight, are you ready to stand before God? If you're here tonight, not yet a child of God, you realize that you've sinned, then you're not ready for that appointment. The problem is, none of us know when that will occur. Or if as a child of God, you strayed away from the Lord. If it's you, if it's me, we are not ready for that appointment. The problem is, we all have that appointment, and we don't know when it will be. But you have now. So if you're subject to the Lord's invitation, won't you come as we stand and sing?
For being out this evening. Appreciate having everyone. I'd like to remember those in the announcements. We have so many that are out, and try to remember those and keep them in your prayers, and hopefully we'll all be able to be back together. We'll be meeting again Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for Bible study and 10 a.m. for worship. If there's no other announcements, we'll have one more song. Song number More Precious Than Silver. It'll only be on the PowerPoint above. Following this song, we'll be led in our closing prayer. More Precious Than Silver.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this day, the beautiful sunshine that Thou provided. Dear Heavenly Father, we look so forward for the changing of the season, the warmer weather, the beautiful spring colors that proclaim Thy glory and Thy honor. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that You loved mankind, that You sent Thy only beloved Son to die on the cruel cross that we may have a home with Thee. Dear Heavenly Father, be with those that have fallen by the wayside, that have falling back into sin, falling back into the world. Let something be done that they'll be pricked in the heart and they'll see their lost condition and they'll come back unto Thee. Dear Heavenly Father, when time is no more, give us home with Thee. Jesus Christ. Amen.